Situation back home has largely moved on from the wave of recent xenophobic attacks that rocked South Africa. For scores of Nigerians, the ordeal is far from over. In April and May, anti-immigrant protests and violence linked to groups pushing for tougher enforcement left at least 2 Nigerians dead and triggered a diplomatic row between Abuja and Pretoria. In response, the Nigerian government launched a voluntary repatriation exercise. Hundreds registered. Some flights have already returned citizens, but many others remain stranded. On the Arise Morning Show today, we turn to the plight of those still camped outside the Nigerian High Commission in Pretoria. Families, including young children, have been sleeping on the pavement for weeks in South Africa's freezing winter temperatures, waiting for processing, emergency travel documents, and a flight home. Many Nigerians have little idea just how punishing South Africa's immigration laws have become for those trapped in the system, undocumented, overstayed, or having renounced their status in hope of evacuation, left with nowhere else to turn and limited options. Journalist and founder of Nigeria's No More movement, Ireti Bakare Yusuf, joins us now for a discussion on this. Ireti, Sisi, I call you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you join us on the morning show. I know. I know it was a bit bad, wasn't it? All right, you were in South Africa for a long time. I mean, it got to a point we were worried about you. Like, what is she doing there? But then you churn out fantastic interviews that gave context to what is happening. You spoke with Jacinta, you spoke with a former minister, of foreign affairs for South Africa. You saw what happened. What did you witness, and how did we get to the point that we got to? What was safety like for you, and how will you assess, given the intro that I read out, or the Nigerians that are still left in South Africa, struggling for safety, struggling to get back home?
Thanks, Steve. I think you ask excellent questions. The curious thing about that Jacinta interview, though, is the irony of it. She didn't give it to South Africa. She didn't give that exclusive to the BBC. She didn't give it to Sky. She gave it to Nigeria. I think I'm still trying to figure out, that's just one of the most ironic things that's happened in this whole thing. Look, what did I find out? I mean, I interviewed many people, and I went there. For me, since about April, May, it was apparent, or at least for me anyway, that the character, even though the xenophobic attacks had started since 2008, the character of this one was just significantly different. First of all, it was being sustained for so long. Secondly, there was this, there's always been violence. In 2008, over 60 people died, and incidentally, 20 South Africans were killed in 2008 because they were wrongly presumed to be foreigners. That's how stupid Afrophobia, xenophobia, and indeed tribophobia is. Any sort of phobia that, seeks to exclude others away from, because for whatever reason. So but it was just really weird for me. And I was watching it. And then I thought, I've got to go there. I need to know what's going on. And what did I find? And this is what I went to look for. I went to see whether it's a minority or it's a majority. I wanted to hear what the intellectuals had to say. Those who influence, the bigger voices, those who influence policy, those who can shape socio-economic things and all of that stuff. And those who can actually challenge government. Because Jacinta is not our problem. The South African government, I have to say, like all African governments, continue to let their people down. And as I say to people, that when people watch that interview, and unfortunately, South Africans are far too sensitive to actually see the nonsense in what they're saying. Why do I say that? If you listen to my interview with Jacinta, if you listen to my interview with Dr. Dale McKinley, with Richard Peterhouse, and all of them, even, what's the name? The former minister of, that took Israel to court. I've forgotten the name now. Pando. Thank you, Naledi Pando. You will hear a recurring pattern. And the recurrence is people the South Africans have a right to feel let down. They are angry about unemployment. They are angry about housing. They are angry about health. You know, all the usual infrastructures that all of us are arguing. That's what I'm saying. Yes, this is the point. They have every right to be angry, but certainly it is not the 4.5% migrants who are stealing those away from them. But of course, what happens? What happens is when governments fail, they tend to deflect attention, number one. Number two, when you have a hole in a wall, as we know, geckos will find their way in. So what happened? Of course, you have the right wing, the far right, you've got Action SA, you've got DA, you've even got, arguably, people are saying Israel. All of these people contribute to actually push this awful march forward. Why? Because the other side of that is that South Africa had the courage, the boldness to speak for the world and say, look, Israel, you have committed a genocide. We are taking you to court to make sure you are held accountable. So all of these factors come together. And we must remember, over and above everything, there has been a consistent campaign against South Africa to actually destabilize and, if you like, demarket the country in the eyes of the world. So right now, you're looking at a project that I call Operation Isolate South Africa. And anybody can argue with me, but there are articles that's written in, the Times of Israel that backs this up, that actually says South Africa first. Yes.
Now, let's go into this, because South Africa has had to deal with very interesting international relations of recent. Of course, you had the white genocide claims by Donald Trump, and now we're seeing Operation Dudula, and we're seeing Afrophobia on a sustained level that we have not seen in the past. But another person who I think a lot of people maybe in Nigeria are not paying attention to, before we even get to the plight of Nigerians sleeping outside in winter, is Jacob Zuma and the Umkhonto we Sizwe party. And of course, I've watched a lot of the videos, and I've even seen them thank the MK party at the March to March protest. For you, how are the internal politics of South Africa shaping this crisis?
Big time. Big time. So I'm so thankful to you for mentioning Jacob Zuma, because there's so many factors one forgets, one don't remember everything. So you have the Zulu nationalism, which in itself is big, right? So for instance, if people wonder how big Jacob Zuma is, when Jacob Zuma was accused of several, corruption charges, I think there was like over 700. You can check it. The man was never actually convicted of one. But what was interesting is when they did the commission, to sort of look into the review, he kept not turning up. Eventually, a warrant was issued for his arrest. He was eventually picked up. After he was picked up, do you know there was a big riot in KwaZulu-Natal? Yes. This is the power of Jacob Zuma. Right? So yes, Jacob Zuma's party, MK, never able to pronounce the name properly, forgive my teeth, but, MK, like you rightly said, is very much part of March and March. Indeed, I think they fund March and March, but I'll go further and say, if you notice that after the 30th of June, Jacinta said, we are going to be doing a march every Thursday. There is an election coming up in November, local election in South Africa. They're going to be doing a march every Thursday. Well, why is that important? When you hear her now, it's more about a political campaign. And and Jacinta is, thank you. Jacinta is Zulu. Falik Mtakaiti, oh, I got it right, finally, is Zulu. Most of the leaders of this, they're Zulus. So you've got a president that's stuck between a rock and a hard place. I'm talking about President Ramaphosa, because you have the strength of the Zulus. No, he's not. But the fact is, we all keep saying, why doesn't he arrest Jacinta and all the leaders? Well, look at what happened. Like I said, that's why I said that story of when Jacob Zuma was arrested, there was anarchy anarchy in KwaZulu-Natal.
But of course, his daughter was arrested after that because of her tweets for inciting violence, and we've seen even one of his daughters being accused of helping Russia recruit South Africans for the war against Ukraine. But also the Zulu nationalism and the possible violence goes all the way back to the Mandela time, which nearly upended the first ever democratic election. So these are deeply South African issues. But I would like us now to focus on the Nigerians. Do we have Nigerians sleeping on the pavement right now outside of Pretoria?
Yes, we certainly do. So again, one of the reasons I went there, so I've been there, I went there in June. Most people didn't know. It's only in July when that whole video went viral that people realized, oh my God, it is that they're going to kill her. Certainly they wish they could, but unfortunately they can't. Here's the thing. One of the other reasons I went there, when I went there in June, I saw the South Nigerians sleeping outside the pavement, on the pavement outside our commission. You have to understand what's going on. First and foremost, it's voluntary repatriation, and it's a humongous, I had to witness it myself, it's a humongous project. So how does it work? Basically, you have to submit your names. As soon as the president said, it's okay, we're going to send flights to get our people, they're asking people to submit their names. Of course, trust also jackpot out of this country, and we often forget, like many things good things that jackpot. So many didn't believe that the federal government would do accordingly, right? But those who did put their names down. Now, when you put your name down, you are cleared. Here's the process. You are given clearance, and you are told, go back home, and we will call you when it's time. But of course, how could you go home when you're being threatened at home, when you have the march? But even more so is most people live quite far. So if you live in KZN and you're going to Pretoria, it's not cheap. Do you understand? So people then make the decision to sleep outside the commission. Even more so is there's also that thing where they think, well, maybe when it starts, they won't get hold of me, Nigeria, they might not call me and everything. So that's so I've seen that. I've seen mothers, children, men and everything. But I've also seen the good of Nigeria in South Africa. You have the likes of Reverend and Pastor, I think, Angu, if I remember their names rightly, they took in 70 total strangers into their homes. And give them shelter, Nigerians. Give them shelter. You also have the Nigerian unions and churches and stuff who come there to feed and everything. But there's also been time, because I have to commend our people, and I'm saying our embassy, our mission. In South Africa, we have the High Commissioner, the Charge d'Affaires, and you have the Consul General. So you have the Charge d'Affaires is Ambassador Ajayi, and you have the Consul General, who is Ambassador Nini Kanwa Okeuche. Both of them are focused. Nini, of course, her job is to be closer to the people as a Consul General. So she's also very, very close to this, and she's somebody that works with empathy a lot. I've seen how trying this has been on her, but it's not about praising her. It's about the fact that we've all come together, and they come together, including the two Nigerian unions. You have NUSA and you have NICASA. They all come together to just make things better. So our people are sleeping outside. The last flight is the flights that I came back with, because like I said, I have not given you 10% of what they go through.
Which airline was that?
Air Peace. So our government chartered Air Peace, and whatever. But so you get to the...
always comes to the rescue, isn't it?
Well, if you're getting paid, what's being rescued about it? The government is paying.
It has done a lot without being paid.
I'm just saying this time the government is paying. I speak to facts, I don't speak to emotions.
Yeah, but it has done a lot without being paid.
I'm not saying it hasn't. I'm just saying they are getting...
And the flip side of the argument will be that the big country, the giant of Africa, without a national carrier.
Well, I think
that's a different conversation.
I don't think we need one. I totally don't agree that we need one. What do we want to do with it? The last one we had, we destroyed it. There's more work to be done than having a national carrier. But in any event, go ahead.
Just still thinking about Nigerians out and, sleeping outside. But in addition to all of what has happened so far, we can't forget that there's been violence as well that has left 2 Nigerians dead. And these were not just, killings by random South Africans. These were carried extrajudicial killings killings carried out by the South African police. So do you think that the South African government has taken a strong enough position on this so far? And I ask that because there is a, I guess, school of thought, or there are people who think that the South African government is sort of seizing upon this moment, the cultural moment of the cultural Afrophobia, to allow foreigners to be the fall guy for their own failings.
I don't think that criticism, allegation, claim is too far-fetched, to be honest with you. Remember I said earlier, like, President Ramaphosa is stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I will say, I don't think they stepped up early enough to put a stop to this. Indeed, one of the questions that I put to William Baloye, who is the deputy government spokesperson, official spokesperson, and I said to him, look, why has the South African government ceded their responsibility, their powers to non-state actors? Because that's what March is. Yeah. Kind of gave me a wobbly answer. You know, because as I said to him, in Nigeria, I cannot imagine. Yes, we have protests, by the way. In South Africa, there's apparently 13,000 marches a year. I mean, it's a totally different character type of thing. In Nigeria, maybe we have to, and the federal government starts shaking, and somebody said, oh yeah, stop, help them, beg them, do something. But, you know, what we won't get in Nigeria is get a movement that rises up, that then actually starts to do pogroms. Because what we are seeing is Afro pogroms going into people's homes, going into their businesses, attacking them, throwing them out. Look, a Nigerian died just on Thursday, right? I'm saying that we don't know whether he's been killed or died, but it is likely that he was killed in his home in Cape Town. And in fact, the Nigerian embassy has reported it. But I'll tell you how suspicious it is. Immediately, and this is the good thing about South Africa, immediately the Independent Police Investigation Department, which is the IPD of South Africa, are on it. They're saying we want to investigate this because everybody is screaming that this doesn't make sense. Number one. Number two, a rubber bullet was shot at a Nigerian. His lips, you can't show it because I sent it to your producer. His lips are torn into two, literally. And I keep saying that every time this happens with Nigerians, they say, oh, drugs. Okay, right? Just like the Minister of Presidency did. Every time it's Nigerians, drugs. Let's be clear. How many Nigerians are actually in prison for drug-related offenses in South Africa? Nobody has been able to answer that question. How many Nigerian drug dens have they found in South Africa? Or how many drug dens have they found that belongs to Nigerians? Nobody has been able to answer that question. Now, I'm not saying we don't have Nigerians who do who might be drug, drug dealers. But what I am saying is nobody, absolutely nobody, should be killed like flies, right? Whether you sell drugs or you don't, everybody has the right to innocent until proven guilty. Extrajudicial killings, which goes on and on in South Africa, to answer your question, is hardly ever resolved. But it's not just us. If I may just say, you look at the Malawians, oh my God, I think 3 Malawian women went into labor on the pavement. It is freezing cold, right? The Malawians, thousands are turning up every day. The Congolese, oh my God, can we pray for the Congolese? They are officially refugees because we all know there's a war in their country. Yet, and South Africa took them in as refugees, but yet they've been chased out of their community. When they complain, they're sleeping, 7,000, 8,000, 10,000 of them in Durban by the seafront in the freezing cold on the streets.
From what you have seen in South Africa, and you have been very eloquent about painting the picture of what is happening. But then what would be your advice to the rest of Africa in dealing with South Africa? Because this didn't start yesterday. Like you said, it started in 2008. There was a repeat in 2014, 2015, pockets here and there. How should the rest of Africa deal with South Africa? And I'm not talking about just government and the African Union. I'm also talking about people. We saw what happened at the World Cup. The entire African country was against the South African team, because they just felt that, this is a country that didn't show love to the rest of Africa. I am not for illegal immigration and forceful, cohabiting and everything. But then Africa is all about, is it Ubuntu? What do they call that thing?
Ubuntu.
And everything. How should we deal with it? We've seen the example of Ghana, saying that, no, we won't allow you here, that is Ramaphosa, if you can't deal with the criminals in your country. We haven't had so much, talk from the highest authorities here in terms of something that can inspire you, to. But what do you think should happen?
I think first and foremost, let me just say this. I think it's important that our government remembers that, yes, they've done a lot with the 5 flights and everything, but there are still Nigerians who want to come back home. Yeah. Remember, it's voluntary. Yeah. It's voluntary repatriation. It's not deportation. Yeah. That's number one. The other thing I've got to put out there before I answer your question is that if I were an illegal migrant in South Africa and I'm ready to go home and I buy my ticket and I've had enough of this country. Do you know if I go to the airport, I will be arrested. I will go to jail.
You overstayed.
Yes, I will be arrested. I will go to court and I will be put in jail, even if I serve my time, even if I'm paid my fine, at which point I'm then taken to a place called Lindela. Lindela is a deportation center. There are over 90 Nigerians in Lindela. Unfortunately, I was going to try and sneak into Lindela. Maybe that's when they would have arrested me because they didn't give me official permission. But there are over 90 Nigerians in Lindela and people stay there for months, for years. South Africa is supposed to deport them. They are not deporting them. So we have to, I really need, I'm going to face the camera now because I'm going to say to President Tinubu, at this point, you really need to talk to your brother Africa, President Ramaphosa. And the first, most urgent thing we need is there are Nigerians who are ready to pay for their own tickets. Kindly get us amnesty from prosecution. If we can get amnesty from that prosecution, they will buy their own ticket, then they do not have to be treated like criminals. This is extremely urgent. Why? Because that's why they're all waiting for the repatriation flight. If you go with our flight, with the official government, you don't get arrested. Do you understand? But if you try to go by yourself, you will be arrested. I mean, it's criminalization.
They will need to leave the what did you call it, Lingela?
Yeah,
they need to leave that place first before they could join.
Yes.
And that takes some protocols.
Well, they can't even these are people that should be deported by South Africans, and South Africa hasn't even deported them. It's not Nigeria that's supposed to deport them. That's number. But what I'm even saying is those who are also not in Lindela, those who are out and about, who are ready to come home, a lot are ready to buy their own tickets. We call it self-deport, right? Yeah. But they can't do it themselves because is actually quite xenophobic. In actual fact, I would say it's harder even on their own citizens. There are 4 million South Africans who do not have ID. South Africans, indigenes, who do not have ID. Because if a woman...
Some Nigerians who don't have ID.
No, that's not registered. Not to say ID is different. So if a woman gives birth in, I don't know, Kashafan, right? And the law says you've got to register your baby within 30 days. If you don't get to register that child doesn't exist and doesn't go to school and doesn't do this. But remember, apartheid, what if the mother was born during apartheid and she herself doesn't have any papers? So it's a horrible cycle. What we need, so back to how we should deal with South Africa, because I had to make that appeal out. It's urgent. It's an urgent appeal. How should we deal with South Africa? Because I don't subscribe to this us against them thing. I'm sorry, I just don't. I think Africa is nothing without a collaborative Nigeria and South Africa. Without Nigeria and South Africa, who are the strongest pillars of this continent, the continent falls apart, and you might as well forget anything about Ubuntu or Pan-Africanism. I think what does need to happen though is there needs to be a zero tolerance to ensure this doesn't repeat itself. 2008, over and over and over again. Yeah. So we need the AU. Yeah. The African Union. Go ahead.
But just before you go, we've spoken about this repeating itself, but it's when we talk about the psychological wounds in South Africa and apartheid, the tiring of people, the extrajudicial necklacing and extrajudicial killings and Afrophobia, it stems from that period.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
We believe they have not done enough to heal those wounds, and it's now festering across the continent.
Yes. Absolutely. You know, you've got I interviewed Swelenzima Vavi, who is one of the heads of the biggest unions, and he called this, he said there is a trauma of poverty, the trauma of apartheid, and the trauma of bad governance. All of that mixed together. The TNC, the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, there were several, the likes of Mbeki, people who, in fact, I think even Zuma, who are tasked with actually redressing some of the ills that were done, which was never done, right? And I believe they were reminded. So yes, you said when you have this, you know, I'll say this and I'll forever say it, and we take it for granted in Nigeria, indeed across Africa, is that trauma burrows itself into the body and it transmits into the child all the time, because when it is untreated, I mean, so many times that I came close to tears or that I cried, even when our people arrived back here, even what I saw over there, it's insane. And this is all trauma. Now think about it. I had a round table with South Africans, with Nigerians, you know, journalists, activists, you name it, intellectuals. Do you know people were still talking about the trauma of apartheid that was not healed? That is now also this current trauma, because I have to say, it is not all of South Africa, it is a minority. But as you know, minorities sometimes get bigger mouth than majority, because majorities keep quiet.
Right.
Yeah.
I get you, Riti. I mean, the trauma part is something very deep and touchy and sensitive. But we also can't ignore what you call the victimhood part of it. Our brother and friend, brilliant writer Segun Dikpe calls it victimism. You know, when you perpetually...
I don't agree. I don't agree. I actually think it's unkind.
Apartheid ended in my
only a
lifetime.
generation ago.
It's not...
Only
yes,
a generation ago.
Yes.
How is it that something that only ended... So we call them the born free generation. Yeah. When you talk about that born free generation, do you know they can't even stand Mandela, much as we love him, right? Because they never got the rewards of what they were promised and all those things. I won't call them victimhood. No, sorry. And unless it touches you, don't be naming people
the concept of victimism,
Yes,
according to Segun Dikpe, is deeper than what you think. But thank you so much. Thank you.
And Segun and I need to have a conversation.
Good place for us to leave that for today. Thank you so much for speaking with us today.